Hello and welcome into Hoosier Gameday, brought to you by the Hoosier Network. My name is Noel Fary. Alongside me is Liv Clements, as always. And Liv, typically I would say another week, another loss for the Hoosiers. But this one for them just kind of stung a little bit more. Officially determined they were not bowl eligible this year.
I feel like the weather outside, it being rainy and gloomy, says it all.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say that for the Hoosiers that this wasn't a hard loss for them. Losing to Illinois in overtime is not something they wanted. And yes, it absolutely took them out of being bowl eligible officially. But they kind of put themselves in the gutter themselves. Passing yards, Illinois had 507. IU barely even hit 300 themselves. And then you see the same with rushing yards, only 160. You saw Donovan McCulley did have a good game, though, for himself. 2 touchdowns. A lot of offensive players, though, did step up to the plate, which we thought was going to be the determining factor for IU to get that win. Ultimately, they just couldn't push it out at the end.
Yeah. I think the really interesting thing about this game was that for the first time this season, really at all, we saw a shootout from IU. The offenses were battling. And that's really the main reason why a lot of these players on the Indiana offense had, their high in yards or their high in catches. But ultimately, you finally had a situation where your offense stepped up, but it was just kind of that one game where everything went wrong on the defense.
Right.
You don't like to point fingers, it's a team sport, but the secondary overall, you give up 500 yards in the air against a backup quarterback. That is just rough. It is hard to win football games like that.
Like you said, it's a team effort. Offensively and defensively, you both have to be in a flow. And I think this whole year we've been seeing IU defensively hold it together, and then they get a new offensive coordinator, and then the offense starts to get together, right? But now the defense is standing out there, and taking in the sun. So I think that's what made it really hard. Is one thing was going right, one thing was going awful. And at the end of the day, that came the determining factor. You let it go into overtime, and you let them score 48 points for any team. That's ridiculous. Yeah. I think IU shot themselves in the foot. It was a winnable game for them, and they were on a high. You're thinking about being bowl eligible, which wasn't in conversation at the beginning of the season. But ultimately, now going in these next 2 games, it will say a lot how they, what they're fighting for now.
No, exactly. And I think that's kind of their task now, is to say, what are we playing for? Not only are you maybe playing for pride, but, you're just playing that, maybe some people won't be here next year. Maybe there's going to be some changes made, stuff like that. So there is not a single athlete probably in the country who just is going to say, well, I don't care about these final games.
Exactly.
Everybody's going to be out there playing as hard as they can, but it's just going to be interesting to see what we see going forward.
I just think now it's going to be an individual game. I think everybody, like you said, is just going to come down to, I still need to play for myself.
Exactly.
Whether it's my last year, whether I need to prove a little more something, or I need to get ready for next year. So it'll say a lot of these next 2 games.
Yeah. Well, nonetheless, a disappointing loss for the Hoosiers. There's been some ups and downs on the season, but I've taken a closer look at each of the positional groups for IU this season in these past few episodes. So let's bring on our first special guest to take one final look. Andrew Hillsman in the studio with us today. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. Now, you've covered IU football for the majority of this season so far. You've seen a lot of the games. So, I've also seen a decent amount of IU football. I've taken a look at each of the positional groups as the weeks go on. So now I'm curious to see your opinion on if these specific positional groups have gotten better, worse, or stayed the same as the season has gone on. Let's start with quarterbacks.
Well, there was a lot of discussion, especially at the start of the year, who was going to come into this year as IU starting quarterback between Brendan Sorsby and Taven Jackson. And the start of the year, it looked like Taven Jackson was going to hold on to that spot. And then he had a couple of rough games mid-season, got subbed out for Brendan Sorsby. And Sorsby has really come into his own this past couple of games. He had a heck of a game against Illinois last weekend in Champaign. The defense kind of let him down, but he threw for quite a few yards through the air. A solid game for Sorsby and crew on the offense. I think the quarterbacks have kind of stayed stagnant. You have, on one side, you have Sorsby growing and coming into his own, becoming a good starting quarterback in the Big Ten, and Jackson, on the other hand, kind of tanking it a little bit, falling down and not really being where he needs to be as advertised. I think if Taven Jackson were to be, I guess, still starting, I think I would say it's improved thus far for Indiana, but this year I think the quarterbacks have stayed stagnant. I'm going to say no change.
Okay. Let's go to the running backs now, an interesting positional group for Indiana.
I'm going to say the same because, you look coming into this year, Jalen Lucas looking to be a big factor. Hasn't really been as much out of the backfield. In the air game, he's been solid, especially scoring that breakout touchdown at Lucas Oil Stadium at the start of the year. But losing Josh Henderson has not been fun for this Indiana team.
No.
Now you have Christian Turner, and he's been a great player as well. And I mean, he's really helped. I think it's been the same.
Yeah.
Jalen Lucas, again, not had as much impact as many Hoosier fans wanted him to have. Christian Turner's been there and has been where he needs to be.
Definitely. The receivers now, you've got some guys. You lose Cam Camper. That's interesting. But what do you think about that group?
It's the hotshot group.
Yep.
Donovan McCulley switched over from quarterback, playing the wideout position. He's balling out. I got to tell you, I love watching this guy play the game of football. And you got other guys, Da'Keese Carter, Omar Cooper Jr., E.J. Williams. E.J. Williams, not a guy that a lot of Hoosier fans saw being a big piece of this offense. And now look at him. I mean, he's stepping up into a big role with Cam Camper out for the year, as you said. I think the wide receivers, no doubt, have gotten better throughout this year. I think there's no debate about that. And Donovan McCulley is the guy who's leading that charge along with Da'Keese Carter, E.J. Williams, and Omar Cooper. I'm loving what the receivers are doing. They're the only reason that Indiana was in that game last week against the Fighting Illini.
Definitely. Now, a positional group that kind of started off the year hot. What about the secondary for Indiana?
I tell you, that has been the biggest regression for Indiana thus far. And Noel, let me tell you, they've gotten cooked over the top so many times. Lewis Moore was the only person with a favorable pass coverage grade, according to PFF, last game against Illinois. A rough day for that secondary. And Tom Allen said this week in Inside Indiana Football that he's going to have to change something around. The secondary is going to look different this week. You got to get guys in there who can make plays and then get the guys out who need to build their confidence back up heading into the old bucket game against Purdue in just a week. So I think that secondary, it's been rough for them. That's been the biggest regression, but there's still time to turn around. As you guys said earlier, Indiana, not bowl eligible. Still some improvements to be made. I'm going to say the secondary definitely regressed.
Yeah. Now, that front seven for Indiana, the game disruptors, if you will, how do you see them go on throughout the season?
Man, they've been great. I think they had an off game against Illinois. They gave John Paddock a lot of time to work in the pocket, didn't really pressure him a ton. I can't remember off the top of my head how many sacks they had, but it wasn't a huge factor. But I really do believe that has been huge. Aaron Casey up front, Noah Pierre, he was out against Illinois, but still a great sideline leader. Aaron Casey's been that guy all year. And then Jacob Mangum-Farrar has been helpful as well. That front seven has really been formidable. And breaking up passes at the line has been one of their specialties all year, along with just getting pressure to the quarterback. I think they're going to have a better day against a weaker Michigan State team in which Indiana's favored to win this game. I think they're going to have a better day. That's definitely been a better position group. They've improved from the start of the year until now.
Definitely. Now, our final thing I want to look at is the coaching for Indiana. I mean, everybody knows Tom Allen is on the hot seat right now. How do you see the coaching progress over this past season?
I think this is, I'm glad you saved this for last, Noel, because this, among Hoosier fans, I think this is the biggest point of contention and the biggest point of argument. A lot of people are on the get rid of Tom Allen train. A lot of people are on the keep him around train. I think you can't say that. I think what I have to do is split up. Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach. I think Tom Allen has stayed the same. That's a low bar throughout this year.
Yeah.
He's had some really questionable decisions. I mean, going to those triple option plays at the start of the year, just forcing them down opponents' throats when it just wasn't working was not probably the greatest strategy. On the other side, the defensive coordinator, I think he's done well. I think that the defense has evolved. Secondary, again, needs some work, as we've said, but I think there are the pieces there. Last two games, the defense is going to look good. And then going from Walt Bell to Rod Carey, I think has been a positive for Indiana. I mean, the offense has looked a little bit better.
Yeah.
Still some holes to fill, but I think it looks a lot better under Rod Carey than it did under Walt Bell. Offense, I think, has improved. Defense stayed the same, and I'm going to say head coaching stayed the same as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Andrew. You know, it's really interesting to just take a look at this team, how we saw it at the beginning of the season and how they've evolved to now. But let's bring Liv back on to take a closer look at this weekend's matchup against Michigan State. Second to last game of the season, Liv, the Spartans travel to Bloomington to take on the Hoosiers, two teams that have had their struggles, to say the least. What do you think we're expecting to see out of this game?
I mean, honestly, at this point, with both teams not going to be bowl eligible, and they both realize that, I think it's going to be hard for either team to really look like they are a solid team out there, considering both their last games were a hard one to watch. I mean, Michigan's last game that they lost was 38-3 against OSU, which was definitely hard for them. But they went 2-14 on third down efficiency, 7 penalties, ultimately giving them 70 yards. And of course, now they're struggling with that QB. You have Hauser out there, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, struggles hard in the pocket. I think ultimately with Michigan State, there's not much to desire from them. And same for IU. It's really just going to be who wants it more.
Yeah, I actually do think that this game has the potential to be kind of entertaining
Yes.
just because they're kind of on the same level with each other.
Absolutely.
I think right now Sorsby is probably playing a little bit better than Hauser overall. I mean, you want to talk about an interesting quarterback situation for IU, look at Michigan State throughout this entire year. So while neither team is necessarily playing for a lot, or neither team has had the best season, I do think that we have a chance to see a good game.
I think we do too. I mean, like you said, everyone's scrapping now for the last couple wins. And I think even though you're not bowl eligible, these last 2 wins can be a deciding factor for players, coaches. I mean, Tom Allen's on the hot seat, and I think those 2 wins can help him out a little bit. So no matter what, the season-ending record will say a lot. You still want some conference wins. IU only has 1. You need a little bit more. So I think for both, it's going to be who wants it more. I think their QB position for Michigan State, good Lord, pray for them. But I think it will come down to who plays more. Offensively, the defense for IU has to step up, and you saw it last week's game against Illinois. That secondary was ridiculous, and they have to step up. So it's going to be who wants it more. It's going to be who plays better, shows that they want it more. I mean, IU's last home game, I hope they come out with a bang.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Liv, what do you think the final score is going to be?
I mean, I always go low with IU because I never think they're going to be able to put up that many points. And then they continue to shock me when it comes to last week's game. They put up 45. Like you said, it was a shootout against Illinois. But I'm still going to say the same. I'm going to say IU will actually take this win for their last home game at Memorial Stadium. I'm going to say 21-17. I feel like that's a solid number for them. Get some points on the board and go ahead and have the defense lock in, hopefully, and step up to the plate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that there's going to be a lot of talk, coaching, and practice with the defense this week. Just kind of reminding them who they are and what they're capable of. So as a result, I think they're going to lock in a little bit more. But I do think that this is going to be a chance for both offenses to kind of show out as well. I think Indiana is going to take it.
There we go.
I never predict it, but I do think Indiana is going to take it 27-24.
Who do you think is going to get the touchdowns for IU? Who do you think is really going to... I mean, Donovan McCulley's been having a season. He's hot.
And I think he's trying to keep that up. I think it's really incredible what he's been able to do.
Right.
So I think he's going to get in the end zone for IU.
So we hopefully maybe a one-handed catch again.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
We'll see. But thank you all so much for tuning into Hoosier Game Day, brought to you by the Hoosier Network. We'll be back in 2 weeks for our final episode, so stay tuned. For Andrew Hillsman, Liv Clements, I'm Noel Fary. We'll catch you next time.